Table of contents. Tour the cruise ports, Venice.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. Dr. Sydney at earthlink.net. 2021.
Venice, or in Italian, Venezia, is a city, a major seaport, and the capital of both the province of Venezia and the region of Veneto, northern Italy. An island city, Venice was once the center of a maritime republic. It was the greatest seaport in late medieval Europe, and the continent's commercial and cultural link with Asia. Where is Venice? Venice is northern Italy at the northern end of the Adriatic Sea. Just to the east of Venice on the Adriatic Sea, are the Balkan countries of Slovenia and Croatia. Venice is situated on 120 islands formed by 177 canals in the lagoon between the mouths of the Po and Piave rivers, at the northern extremity of the Adriatic Sea. Because of its historic role as a naval power and commercial center, the city is known as the Queen of the Adriatic. Venice's nicknames include Queen of the Adriatic, City of Water, City of Bridges, and the City of Light. Venice is one of the world's oldest tourist and cultural centers.
Today Venice is recognized as part of the artistic and architectural treasure. A fitting role for a city whose thousand-year economic and political independence was sustained by its role in global trading.
Venice is unique environmentally, architecturally, and historically, and in its days as a republic the city was called La Serenissima, the most serene or sublime. It remains a major Italian port in the northern Adriatic. Venice has held an unrivaled place in the imagination and has been endlessly described in prose and verse. The ornate marbled and frescoed palaces, towers, and domes have been painted, photographed, and filmed to such an extent that it is difficult to distinguish the real city from its romantic representations. The visitor arriving in Venice is still transported into another world, one whose atmosphere and beauty remain incomparable. The situation of the city on islands has limited modern suburban spread beyond the historic center, and its framework of canals and narrow streets has prevented the intrusion of automobiles. The unmatched wealth of fine buildings and monuments dating from the period of commercial dominance has ensured a desire for sensitive conservation. In 1987 Venice and its lagoon were collectively designated a World Heritage Site. Venice is the capital of region of Veneto in Italy. The region of Veneto has as its most famous city Venice at the head of the Adriatic Sea. Here also are other towns made famous in Shakespeare's plays, such as Padua and Verona. Next to Veneto, in the northeastern corner of Italy, is the region of Friuli Venezia Giulia. The principal city there is the major Italian seaport of Trieste on the Adriatic. Venice is in the Veneto region and the capital of Venice province. Here is Veneto showing the location of the province of Venice. The Po River, in Latin, Pontus, is the longest river in Italy, and flows 405 miles, or 652 kilometers, eastward across northern Italy, from the Italian Alps to the Adriatic Sea near Venice. The Po goes through many important Italian towns, including Turin, Torino, and, indirectly, through Milan, Milano. Just to the north of Venice is the Piave River. Here is the province of Venice in the region of Veneto. The Veneto region lies between the Dolomite Alps to the north and west, and the Adriatic Sea on the east. Venice extends across numerous small islands and the marshy Venetian Lagoon along the Adriatic Sea in northeast Italy. The saltwater lagoon stretches along the shoreline between the mouths of the Po, to the south, and the Piave, to the north, rivers. At the northwestern end of the Adriatic Sea, Venice lies on an archipelago in a crescent-shaped lagoon that stretches some 32 miles, or 51 kilometers. Long sandbars, or barrier beaches, called lidi on the outer side of the lagoon serve as protection against the sea. The islands on which Venice is built are connected by more than 400 bridges. A rail and road causeway connects Venice with the mainland. The shallow waters of the lagoon are protected by a line of sandbanks, or lidi, singular, lido, whose three gaps, or porti, singular, porto, allow passage of the 3-foot, 1 meter, tides and the Venice's maritime traffic. On the sandbanks are many small settlements, some of them centuries old. The best known is the Lido itself, that was built as a fashionable seaside resort in the 19th century. This is the Hotel des Bains on the Lido. Today the administrative city of Venice embraces the 90-mile perimeter of the lagoon, including the mainland urban and industrial complex of Mestre and Marghera and the Marco Polo International Airport. The population estimate of 272,000 inhabitants includes the population of the whole commune of Venezia, around 62,000 in the historic city of Venice, Centro Storico, 176,000 in terra firma, literally firm land, the areas outside the lagoon, mostly in the large frazione of Mestre and Marghera, and 31,000 live on other islands in the lagoon. The city of Venice is divided into 6 districts known as sestieri. The sestiere di San Marco is the zone where the majority of the essential sites of Venice are clustered, and it is accordingly the most crowded and expensive district of the city. The Giudecca Canal, about 400 meters, 1,310 feet, wide, separates Giudecca Island, on the extreme south, from Venice proper. Here is Venice and some of the adjacent islands in the lagoon. Cruise ships dock at the Marittima port. The Marittima port is within walking distance of Piazza di Roma, the main transportation center of Venice. Venice's people mover offers quick, and wheelchair-accessible, connections to the Piazza di Roma, where locals and visitors arrive in the city by public bus, airport bus, taxi, or car. The Marattima station is located just outside the Marattima port entrance, which means that passengers need to walk to, or from, their ships. There are 2 vehicles, each one has a capacity of 200 people, arriving every 3 minutes. The Piazzale Roma is the main transportation center of Venice near the railroad station. The water taxis or Vaporetti can be caught here. However, most cruise ships offer a shuttle boat service from the pier to the St. Zaccaria pontoon that is just 100 yards from San Marco Square. Here is a view from the Marattima port showing the location of the Piazzale Roma.
The Grand Canal, about 3 kilometers, or 2 miles long, winds through Venice from northwest to southeast, dividing the city into 2 nearly equal portions.
No motor vehicles are permitted on the narrow, winding lanes and streets that penetrate the old city, and the bridges are for pedestrians only. For centuries the most common method of transport was by gondola, a flat-bottomed boat propelled by a single oar. The gondola has been a part of Venice since the 11th century. In 1562 it was decreed that all gondolas should be painted black to stop people from making an ostentatious show of their wealth. For special occasions the gondolas are decorated with flowers. Today, the gondolas are used mainly by tourists. Motor launches known as Vaporetti carry almost all the freight and passenger traffic in Venice. Here 2 Vaporetti approach each other on the Canale Grande. Venice is world famous for its canals. It is built on an archipelago of 122 islands formed by about 150 canals in a shallow lagoon. The islands on which the city is built are connected by about 400 bridges. In the old center of Venice, the canals serve the function of roads, and every form of transport is on water or on foot. In the 19th century, a causeway to the mainland brought a railway station to Venice, and an automobile causeway and parking lot was added in the 20th century. Beyond these land entrances at the northern edge of the city, transportation within the city remains, as it was in centuries past, entirely on water, or on foot. A rio or canal is the typical water road of Venice. The rii divide the approximately 122 small islands that make up the city. There are 150 canals including the Grand Canal. Venice is Europe's largest urban car-free area, unique in Europe in remaining a sizable functioning city in the 21st century entirely without motor cars or trucks. Here is 1500 years of history in 5 minutes, or maybe a little bit more. Back in 456 BC, what was to become Venice was just some uninhabited low, sandy, and marshy islands in the lagoon.
This map shows the Roman Empire at its greatest extent in 118 AD. The empire extended from the
Roman Empire thus encompassed the Mediterranean, ruled every civilized land in Europe and Africa, and extended into Asia. The only other civilized countries in the world lay farther east, in Asia. Emperor Trajan extended Roman rule into Mesopotamia, now Iraq. Hadrian, however, withdrew to the previous frontier. Now, even hundreds of years later, in 356 AD, the islands that were to become Venice were still uninhabited, low, sandy, and marshy islands in the lagoon. Barbarian invasions of the 4th to 5th centuries AD destroyed the Western Roman Empire. The western part of the empire, Gaul, Iberia, and the North Africa were invaded by nomadic horse peoples from the Eurasian steppe. These hordes of invaders that descended from the north included the Goths, Vandals, and Huns from Asia, wreaking terror and devastation. These conquerors soon became settled, and adopted many of the local customs, forming many small and warring kingdoms. The defeat of Attila the Hun's forces by the allied Roman and Visigoth armies at Chalon in 451, thwarted his first campaign into the heart of Western Europe. However, Attila's ambitions and audacity were not diluted by the experience, only redirected. In the spring of the following year, 452, Attila moved his armies directly south, straight toward Ravenna itself, western capital of the Roman Empire. Aquileia, at the head of the Adriatic, fell first and was totally destroyed. During Attila the Hun's brutal Italian invasion in 452 AD, the population of the countryside fled before his army. Many sought refuge on the small islands in the lagoons lining the western coast of the Adriatic, augmenting the fishermen population that already lived there. Although many of the refugees returned to their mainland homes after Attila's withdrawal, the origin of the future island Colossus of Venice is often traced to the migration caused by Attila's invasion. Although nominally part of the Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire, Venice was virtually autonomous. Over the years, as the Byzantine Empire shrunk, Venice became more and more independent. The Byzantine Empire was unable to prevent the Lombard invasion of 568. As a result, new settlements were founded on the lagoon islands of Malamocco and Torcello. In 697, the Venetians organized Venice as a republic under an elected Doge, or leader. Internal dissent disturbed the course of government during the following century, but the threat of foreign invasion united the Venetians. Attacks by Saracens in 836 and by the Hungarians in 900 were successfully repulsed. The first Doge or leader, Palazzos of Venice, was elected in 697 AD. Orso was elected the leader in 727 with the Latin title of Dux, or, in the Venetian dialect, Doge. The process of electing a local Doge was continued after his death in 737. Orso was the first elected leader of a republic that survived almost 1,100 years, the longest-lived republic in history. The most serene Republic of Venice, in Italian, Serenissima Repubblica di Venezia, or in the Venetian dialect, Repubblica di Venezia, existed from the 8th century until the 18th century, ending in 1797. It is often referred to as the Serenissima, in reference to its title in Italian, the most serene. The Venetian Republic lasted 1,100 years, the longest-lived republic in history. In 828 AD, Venice stole the relics of Saint Mark from Alexandria. Saint Mark was then proclaimed as the city's new patron saint. In 991, Venice signed a commercial treaty with the Muslims, initiating the Venetian policy of trading with the Muslims rather than fighting them. Being an island people, the Venetians were excellent sailors and enterprising merchants. They brought cargoes of spices, silk, rice, sugar and other valuable commodities from Asia, North Africa and the Middle East, and distributed them throughout Western Europe. When these trading routes were threatened by pirates in the year 1000, Doge Pietro Orsilio won a decisive naval victory and secured Venetian control of Dalmatia, modern-day Croatia. The Venetian Republic was a major sea power and a staging area for the Crusades, as well as a very important center of commerce, especially the spice trade, and art in the Renaissance. Ironically, Venice lost much of its power and importance due to the decline and fall of the Byzantine Empire, which Venice had helped to destroy. This was due to the fact that Turkish control of the eastern Mediterranean gave the European maritime powers incentive to find trade routes elsewhere. The Crusades and the resulting development of trade with Asia led to the establishment of Venice, as the greatest commercial center for trade with the East. This was at a time when transportation by land was very difficult, so the strategic position of Venice at the head of the Adriatic Sea was very important. By this time the Byzantine Empire was in terminal decline, and many of its trading routes were taken over by Venice, whose newfound wealth and power established the city as a significant regional power. The Venetian Republic became politically the strongest European power in the Mediterranean. The growth of a wealthy aristocracy gave rise to an attempt by the nobles to acquire political dominance, and, although nominally a republic, Venice became a rigid oligarchy by the end of the 13th century. Venice also played a leading role in equipping and financing the Crusades. In 1204, the blind Doge, Enrico Dandolo, persuaded the Crusaders to plunder the rival city of Constantinople en route to Jerusalem and the Holy Land. Huge quantities of Byzantine treasure were carried back in triumph to Venice, including the four tetrarchs, and the horses of St. Mark's, which were placed outside the Basilica di San Marco. The porphyry statue of the four tetrarchs, the four rulers of the Roman Empire following its division by Diocletian, was looted from Constantinople in 1204. Marco Polo was a Venetian trader and explorer who gained fame for his worldwide travels. The worldwide travels of Marco Polo were recorded in the book Il Milione, the Million, or the Travels of Marco Polo. Polo, together with his father Niccolo, and his uncle Maffeo, was one of the first Westerners to travel the Silk Road to China, which was then called Cathay, and visit the great Khan of the Mongol Empire, Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan. This map shows the travels of Marco Polo. This shows the extensive trade routes of the four maritime republics of the Mediterranean: Venice, Genoa, Pisa, and Amalfi. Both Venice and Genoa become wealthy and powerful because of increased trade in the Mediterranean with eastern countries. In the 13th and 14th centuries, Venice was involved in a series of wars with Genoa, its chief commercial rival. In the War of 1378 to 1381, Genoa was compelled to acknowledge Venetian supremacy. Wars of conquest enabled Venice to acquire neighboring territories, and by the late 15th century, the city-state was the leading maritime power in the Christian world. This shows the Venetian Republic in 1350. This shows the Venetian Republic in 1400. Although primarily a naval power, the Venetians were aware that they could be attacked from the mainland and so consolidated their position by annexing large areas of northern Italy during the 15th century. Venetian sovereignty of Padua, Vicenza, Verona, and virtually all the territory between the River Po and the Alps was recognized by the Peace of Lodi in 1452. Venice now possessed a sizable commercial empire, which also included Dalmatia and numerous Greek islands. Although Venice may aptly be regarded as an isolated sea city, it has always had close links with the surrounding marshlands in the mainland of northern Italy. The Venetian Republic included the perimeter of the Lagoon, the Doge, and, from the early 15th century, amassed a large land empire known as terra firma, dry land. The terra firma, dry land, stretched from the Istrian peninsula, of Slovenia and Croatia, to the borders of Milan, and from the Po River to the High Alps. From the 16th century onward, the Venetians invested heavily in the purchase, reclamation, and drainage of terra firma lands. The imprint of the Republic may still be seen in former subject cities, such as Padua, Verona, and Vicenza, where Venetian Gothic palaces line the streets and the symbol of Venice, the Lion of San Marco, stands over the city squares. This is what was to later become Italy, in the Middle Ages. This is a painting by Giovanni Battista Tiepolo. Neptune offers the wealth of the sea to Venice. This painting is an allegory of the power of the Republic of Venice, as the wealth and power of the Serenissima was based on the control of the sea. Europe continued to increase in power as the Renaissance began in northern Italy. The Islamic states had never been major naval powers, and trade from the east to Europe was soon in the hands of Italian traders, especially the Venetians, who profited immensely from it. The beginning of Turkish invasions in the middle of the 15th century marked the decline of Venetian supremacy. Venice faced a new threat from the Ottoman Turks who were blocking her eastern trade routes. In 1571 the Turks seized the Venetian stronghold of Cyprus. The Venetian navy hunted down the Turkish forces and defeated them at the Battle of Lepanto. However, the Turks retained a huge numerical superiority, and despite its victory Venice still had to pay tribute in order to keep its trading routes open. Thereafter, faced with attacks by foreign invaders and other Italian states, the power of Venice waned, and the discovery of a sea route to the Indies around the Cape of Good Hope by the Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama in 1497 and 1498 accelerated the decline. The new trading routes to India and China via the Cape of Good Hope enabled the English, Dutch and Portuguese to undercut Venetian merchants. With the shifting of trade from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, Venice began a slow decline. In 1508 Pope Julius II attempted to secure papal authority in Italy by creating the League of Cambrai, an alliance aimed at curbing Venetian power. The Holy Roman Empire, the Pope, France, and Spain combined against Venice and divided the Venetian possessions among themselves. With the shifting of trade from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, Venice began a slow decline. By 1648, Venice lost control of Cyprus in the eastern Mediterranean. This is the Venetian Republic in 1700. Control of the island of Crete has now been lost. This is the Republic of Venice in 1796. It is now reduced to an area around Venice itself, and narrow strips of territory on the Dalmatian coast. This shows Italy, and the Republic of Venice in 1796. The year 1797 marks the end of the Venetian Republic. In 1797 the Venetian Republic was conquered and ended by Napoleon Bonaparte, who turned the territory over to Austria. In 1805 Austria was compelled to yield Venice to the French-controlled Kingdom of Italy, but regained it in 1814. Incessant warfare had exhausted Venice to such an extent, that by the 18th century, it was necessary to create new aristocratic titles in order to raise funds for the treasury. Austria lost control of Venice in 1866, but the city did not recover its independence. Instead it was ceded to the newly created Kingdom of Italy. Italian unification, called in Italian the Risorgimento, or resurgence, was the political and social process that unified various states of the Italian peninsula into the single nation of Italy. The process of the unification of Italy began with the Congress of Vienna in 1815 and the end of Napoleonic rule, and largely ended with the Franco-Prussian War in 1871, though the last Città Irritante did not join the Kingdom of Italy until the Treaty of Saint-Germain after World War I. Giuseppe Garibaldi, born in 1807, was an Italian patriot, soldier, and freedom fighter who led the Risorgimento that sought Italian unification and independence. The Kingdom of Italy was finally established in 1861, due in large part to Garibaldi's leadership and military successes against occupying European forces. Victor Emmanuel was made King of Italy in 1861, and Italy was officially unified in 1870. Then in the period 1860 to 1870, the annexation of first the region of Venice, Venetia, and then finally Rome completed the unification of Italy. In 1866, Venice became part of Italy. In 1902 St. Mark's Bell Tower collapsed, and had to be completely rebuilt by 1912. The city survived World War II unscathed. In 1966 a flood caused serious damage to historic buildings. Venice is today almost entirely dependent on the tourist industry, and continues to lose population at an increasing rate since many Venetians can no longer afford to live in the city, or prefer to migrate to the mainland where the amenities are better. Venice is now little more than a monument to its own former greatness. Venice was ruled by a small number of aristocratic families through an executive committee known as the Council of Ten. The Council of Ten, or simply the Ten, was one of the major governing bodies of the Republic of Venice for 487 years, from 1310 to 1797. Although the actions of the Council of Ten were often secretive, it was generally considered to be fair and effective by the citizens of the Republic. The Doge was elected for life by the Council. Since many Doges became senile in their later years, the Doge was often more of a constitutional figurehead and a powerful ruler. The Venetians also introduced a series of checks and balances intended to prevent any one person from acquiring excessive power. The common people were permitted an illusion of democracy. They were able to veto the election of the Doge and could vote on other minor issues. However, they could not elect the Council of Ten, or replace one aristocratic family with another. The Venetian Republic preserved political stability by adopting an oligarchic model. Any individual who attempted to seize absolute power was either blinded and castrated, or beheaded. Treacherous intrigues were, however, rare since the system was generally accepted, and worked surprisingly well. Venetian nobles fostered a genuine patrician regard for the welfare of their people and considered themselves bound by notions of justice and fairness. Venice is possibly the best historical example of a state achieving stability through the governance of a benevolent aristocracy. The buildings of Venice are constructed on closely spaced wood piles, which were imported from Russia. Wood does not decay underwater in the absence of oxygen, which penetrate alternating layers of clay and sand. The foundations of the buildings rest on the piles, and buildings of brick or stone sit above these footings. Most of these piles are still intact after centuries of submersion. The buildings are often threatened by flood tides pushing in from the Adriatic between autumn and early spring. 600 years ago, Venetians protected themselves from land-based attacks by diverting all the major rivers flowing into the lagoon, and thus preventing sediment from filling the area around the city. This created an ever deeper lagoon environment. During the 20th century, when many artesian wells were sunk into the periphery of the lagoon to draw water for local industry, Venice began to subside. It was realized that extraction of the aquifer was the cause. This sinking process has slowed markedly since artesian wells were banned in the 1960s. However, the city is still threatened by more frequent low-level floods, the so-called acqua alta, or high water, that creep to a height of several centimeters over its quays, regularly following certain tides. In many old houses, the former staircases used by people to unload goods are now flooded, rendering the former ground floor uninhabitable. Thus, many Venetians resorted to moving up to the upper floors and continuing with their lives. Modern Venice has faced many challenges, including loss of population to other areas and physical damage from flooding, subsidence, erosion, air and water pollution, and age. Since the early 20th century, Venice has sunk 23 centimeters, 12 inches, deeper into the lagoon, and in 2003 work began on a multi-billion-dollar anti-flood project to protect the city from further sinkage. The construction of a 1.6 kilometers, 1 mile, long mobile defense barrier that will shut off high tides was scheduled for completion by 2011. A chain of floodgates will be constructed in 3 channels at the north and south ends of the Lido, the long narrow island separating Venice's lagoon from the sea. A 4th barrier will be constructed at Chioggia, a fishing village at the southern end of the lagoon. The project was due to be finished between 2007 and 2010. Some recent studies have suggested that the city is no longer sinking, but this is not yet certain. Therefore, the state of alert has not been revoked. In May 2003, the Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi inaugurated the MOSE project, Modulo Sperimentale Elettromeccanico, an experimental model for evaluating the performance of inflatable gates. The idea is to lay a series of 79 inflatable pontoons across the seabed at the 3 entrances to the lagoon. When tides are predicted to rise above 110 centimeters, the pontoons will be filled with air and block the incoming water from the Adriatic Sea. 1. In normal conditions, the floodgates lie on the seabed. Tanks inside the gates are filled with seawater. 2. When high tides are expected, compressed air is pumped into the gates, pushing the water out and causing the gates to rise on hinges. 3. Once raised, the gates form a slanting barrier against the incoming tide. The gates are 30 meters high, and 5 meters thick. Some Italian experts are proposing a dramatic new solution by pumping huge quantities of seawater into the ground beneath Venice down 12 pipes, each 700 meters long. The seawater would make the sand beneath the city expand, lifting Venice by 30 centimeters, 12 inches, in 10 years. The basis of the Venetian economy is tourism. Along with the beauty of the architecture and canals and the many art and cultural attractions, there are numerous film festivals and other events throughout the year that attract visitors. The city is also famous for its glassware, mirrors, and beads, most of which are manufactured on the nearby island of Murano. Venetian lace, made chiefly on the island of Murano, is also popular. On the mainland, in Mestre and Marghera, are shipbuilding facilities and many industrial plants, including steelworks, foundries, and chemical factories. Since World War II, Many Venetians have moved to these areas seeking jobs and housing. The Marghera port, which handles most of the area's seagoing traffic, is reached by a channel that is an extension of the Giudecca Canal. Venice is considered one of the most beautiful cities in the world. The city buildings and decorations, from Byzantine to Renaissance styles, show great artistic achievement. The primary traditional divisions of Venice are the sestieri. The city is divided into the 6 districts of Can Regia, San Polo, Dorsoduro, including the Giudecca, Santa Croce, San Marco, including San Giorgio Maggiore, and Castello, including San Pietro di Castello and Sant'Elena. At the front of the gondolas there is a large piece of metal representing a Doge's hat, with 6 taps pointing forwards and 1 pointing backwards. Each of these represent one of the sestieri. The one which points backwards represents Giudecca. The curved section represents the Canale Grande, and the arch towards the top represents the Rialto Bridge. The works of the Venetian School of Art are represented throughout Venetian palaces, public buildings, and churches. Most of the major sites of Venice are near the Piazza San Marco and the Grand Canal. Here are some of the major sites of Venice. The center and most frequented part of Venice is Piazza San Marco, often known in English as St. Mark's Square, the principal square of Venice. It is extremely popular with tourists, photographers, and pigeons. St. Mark's Square is the only urban space called a piazza in Venice. The others, regardless of size, are called campi. This is a map of the area near St. Mark's Square. This shows the location of St. Mark's Square, the Grand Canal, and the Marittima Port. Here is St. Mark's Square, or Piazza San Marco. This shows the location of the points of interest near St. Mark's Square. At the eastern end Piazza San Marco is St. Mark's Basilica and the Doge's Palace, Palazzo Ducale, the 2 most important and imposing structures in Venice. The northern side of the piazza is occupied by the Procuriate Vecchie, and the southern side by the Procuriate Nuove. During the time of the Venetian Republic these buildings were the residences of the 9 procurators, or magistrates, from among whom the Doge, or chief magistrate, was usually selected. Both the Procuriate Vecchie, 1496, and the Procuriate Nuove, 1584, are in the Italian Renaissance style. There are 2 Vaporetti landings that are very close to St. Mark's Square. The shuttle boat from cruise ships goes to the St. Zaccaria pontoon. From the San Zaccaria pontoon to Piazza San Marco is only about 100 yards, or meters. The piazza originated in the 9th century as a small area in front of the original St. Mark's Basilica. It was enlarged to its present size and shape in 1177. The piazza has always been seen as the center of Venice. It was the location of all the important offices of the Venetian state, and has been the seat of the archbishopric since the 19th century. It was also the focus for many of Venice's festivals, and is a very popular place even today. St. Mark's Basilica, in Italian, Basilica di San Marco of Venezia, the Cathedral of Venice, is the most famous of the city's churches and one of the best-known examples of Byzantine architecture. The basilica is on St. Mark's Square, adjacent and connected to the Doge's palace, and has been the seat of the Patriarch of Venice, the Archbishop of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Venice since 1807. For its opulent design, gilded Byzantine mosaics, and its status as a symbol of Venetian wealth and power from the 11th century on, the building was known by the nickname, Chiesa d'Oro, or Church of Gold. The cathedral was begun about 828, restored after a fire in 976, and rebuilt between 1047 and about 1071. It is an outstanding example of Byzantine architecture. The first St. Mark's was a temporary building in the Doge's palace, constructed in 828, when Venetian merchants acquired the supposed relics of St. Mark the Evangelist from Alexandria. This was replaced by a new church on its present site in 832. The church is based on a Greek cross inscribed in a square with each arm of the cross emphasized by a dome of its own. The design is based on Justinian's Basilica of the Apostles in Constantinople. The basilica was consecrated in 1094, the same year in which the body of St. Mark was supposedly rediscovered in a pillar by Vitali Failure, the Doge at the time. The crypt then housed the relics until 1811. The horses of St. Mark were installed on the basilica in about 1254. They date to classical antiquity, and by some accounts they once adorned the Arch of Trajan. The horses were long displayed at the Hippodrome of Constantinople, and in 1204 Doge Enrico Dandolo sent them back to Venice as part of the loot sacked from Constantinople in the Fourth Crusade. They were taken by Napoleon in 1797 but restored in 1815 and remain in place until the 1990s, and now sit in an exhibition room. The horses now on the facade of the cathedral are bronze replicas. St. Mark's Campanile is the bell tower of St. Mark's Basilica. It has been repeatedly rebuilt over the succeeding centuries. The campanile reached its present form in 1514. As it stands today, however, the tower is a reconstruction, completed in 1912 after the collapse of 1902. The Doge's Palace or Palazzo Ducale was begun about 814, destroyed 4 times by fire, and each time rebuilt on a more magnificent scale is a remarkable building in the Italian Gothic style with some early Renaissance elements. The current palace was largely constructed from 1309 to 1424 on 9th century origins. The Doge's Palace was the official residence of the Doge, or Chief Magistrate of the Republic of Venice, during the time when Venice was an independent city-state. The building was begun in the 14th century. During the 16th century, Venetian painters such as Titian, Tintoretto, and Veronese decorated the interior of the Doge's palace. The palace also contained the offices of a number of political institutions, arranged around a central courtyard. The first floor was occupied by lawyers' offices, the chancellery, the censors and the naval offices. On the second floor were the Grand Council Chamber, the Ballot Chamber and the Doge's apartments. The third floor has the Sala del Collegio, adorned with paintings, including those of several Doges, and Paolo Veronese's Lepanto, where foreign ambassadors were received. There are rooms used by the government bodies, like the Council of Ten, as well. Perhaps the most spectacular room is the Grand Council Chamber, or Sala del Maggior Consiglio, originally the meeting place for the legislature. This huge space is lined, walls and ceiling, with paintings, particularly portraits of the Doges, but one of which, Tintoretto's Vast Paradise, is reputedly the world's largest painting on canvas. Another great room is the Sala dello Scrutinio, with other interesting paintings, including Andrea Vicentino's Battle of Lepanto. At the rear of the palace is the Bridge of Sighs, connecting to the prison. This is the Doge's palace and the Bridge of Sighs. In reality, the days of inquisitions and summary executions were over by the time the bridge was built, and the cells under the palace roof were occupied mostly by small-time criminals. In addition, little could be seen from inside the bridge due to the stone grills covering the windows. This is the Doge's palace. These are the stairs in Doge's palace.
The Cadioro, or more correctly, the Palazzo Santa Sofia, is one of the most beautiful palazzos on the Grand Canal in Venice. One of the older palazzos, it has always been known as the Cadioro, Golden House, due to the gilt and polychrome external decorations which once adorned its walls. This is the Cadioro on the Grand Canal, just beyond the Rialto Bridge. This shows the Cadioro and the Rialto Bridge.
The palazzo was built between 1428 and 1430 for the Contarini family, who provided Venice with 8 doges between 1043 and 1676. Upon election, each new doge would leave his own palazzo and take residence in the doge's palace. The Carrezzonico is a palazzo on the Grand Canal in Venice. Today it is a public museum dedicated to 18th century Venice. The Carrezzonico is on the Grand Canal, just beyond the Accademia Bridge. This shows the location of the Carrezzonico, the Grand Canal, and the Accademia and Accademia Bridge.
The Carrezzonico is a palazzo on the Grand Canal in Venice. Today it is a public museum dedicated to 18th century Venice. The Carrezzonico was built in 1649 by Filippo Bonin, the Venetian Baroque style that slowly replaced the more floral Gothic style of such palazzi. as its near neighbor Ca' Foscari and Ca' d'Aro built over 100 years previously.
The Palazzo Contarini del Bovolo, also called Palazzo Contarini Manelli del Bovolo, is a small palace in Venice, best known for the external spiral staircase with numerous arches, known as the Scala Contarini del Bovolo. This palace dates from the 15th century, and is apparently in poor state of restoration, although the staircase that leads to an arcade provides a charming panoramic vista over some of the rooftops of the city. The Basilica di Santa Maria della Salute, Basilica of Saint Mary of Health, or Salvation, is commonly known simply as the Salute. The Basilica di Santa Maria della Salute is located scenically at a narrow finger of land which lies between the Grand Canal and the Bacino Basin di San Marco on the Lagoon, visible as one enters the Piazza San Marco from the water. This is the location of Basilica di Santa Maria della Salute. While it has the status of a minor basilica, its decorative and distinctive profile and location make it among the most photographed churches in Italy. Starting in the summer of 1629, a wave of the plague assaulted Venice, and over the next 2 years killed nearly a third of the population. The Venetian Senate in October 1630 decreed that a new church would be built in hopes of stopping the plague. The new church was not to be dedicated to a mere plague or patron saint, but to the Virgin Mary, who for many reasons was thought to be a protector of the Republic. It was also decided that the Synod would visit the church yearly, on the 21st of November, the feast of the Presentation of the Virgin, in a celebration known as the Festa della Madonna della Salute, where the city's officials parade from San Marco to the Salute for a service in gratitude for deliverance from the plague. This is still a major event in Venice. Campo di San Polo is the largest campo or square in Venice after that of Piazza San Marco. Campo di San Polo was originally dedicated to grazing and agriculture. In 1493 it was entirely paved, and a well, one of the few fountains to be found in Venice, was placed in the middle. Campo di San Polo was subsequently used as the scene of bullfights, mass sermons and masked balls. After the 17th century the poor's market was moved here from Piazza San Marco. Campo di San Polo remains to this day one of the most popular carnival venues, and is also used for open-air concerts and screenings during the film festival. The bridges and canals of Venice. This is the Grand Canal. This is another view of the Grand Canal. This is a view of bridges and canals in Venice. This is a small canal, the Rio della Verona. The Rialto Bridge, in Italian, Ponte di Rialto, is a bridge spanning the Grand Canal in Venice. It is the oldest bridge across the canal, and probably the most famous in the city. The first dry crossing of the Grand Canal was a pontoon bridge built in 1181 by Niccolo Baratieri. It was called the Ponte della Moneta, presumably because of the mint that stood near its eastern entrance. The development and importance of the Rialto market on the eastern bank increased traffic on the floating bridge. It was replaced around 1250 by a wooden bridge. This structure had two inclined ramps meeting at a movable central section that could be raised to allow the passage of tall ships. The present stone bridge is a single span designed by Antonio da Ponte, and completed in 1591. It is remarkably similar to the wooden bridge it succeeded. Two inclined ramps lead up to a central portico. On either side of the portico the covered ramps carry rows of shops. The engineering of the bridge was considered so audacious that architect Vincenzo Scamozzi predicted future ruin. The Rialto Bridge has defied its critics to become one of the architectural icons of Venice. The Bridge of Sighs, or in Italian, Ponte de Sospiri, is one of many bridges in Venice built in the 16th century. The enclosed bridge is made of white limestone and has windows with stone bars. It passes over the Rio di Palazzo, and connects the old prisons to the interrogation rooms in the Doge's palace. The name Bridge of Sighs derives from the size of the prisoners who had to cross it as they were being brought before the inquisitors. The bridge name, given by Lord Byron in the 19th century, comes from the suggestion that prisoners would sigh at their final view of beautiful Venice out the window before being taken down to their cells. The Bridge of Sighs was built to connect the ducal palace with the dungeons. The 18th century writer and libertine Casanova, a native of Venice, was imprisoned here in 1755 accused of being a Freemason. Casanova escaped 15 months later and fled to France, where he continued his career of intrigue and scandal. In reality, the days of inquisitions and summary executions were over by the time the bridge was built, and the cells under the palace roof were occupied mostly by small-time criminals. A local legend says that lovers will be assured eternal love if they kiss on a gondola at sunset under the bridge. This legend played a key part in the 1979 film, A Little Romance. The Ponte dell'Accademia is one of only 3 bridges in Venice to span the Grand Canal. It crosses near the southern end of the canal, and is named for the Accademia galleries. The original steel structure of the Ponte dell'Accademia, built in 1854, was demolished and replaced by a wooden bridge in the 1930s. The second bridge, in a dangerous condition, was raised and replaced by the present bridge, of identical construction in 1985. This is the Ponte dell'Accademia, with the Academy of Vaporetti station visible in the background. The Ponte degli Scalzi, or Ponte Descalzi, literally, Bridge of the Barefoot, is one of only 3 in Venice to span the Grand Canal. Here are the 3 bridges spanning the Grand Canal. The number 1 Vaporetti local line zigzags between 20 stations on its way from the Piazza di Roma to the Lido. The number 1 local line is popular with tourists because it offers a leisurely tour of the Grand Canal, and offers a quick way to get from one side of the canal to the other. The number 2 express line runs from San Zaccaria, above the Piazza San Marco, through the Giudecco Canal to the Piazzale Roma, and the railway station. During the day, boats continue up the Grand Canal to the Rialto, with a smaller number continuing to San Marco's Valoriso stop. In 1516 the government of Venice issued special laws, that established the first ghetto of Europe. It was an area where Jews were forced to live, and which they could not leave from sunset to dawn. The ghetto area was closed by gates and watched by guards. Jews were allowed to practice only some professions. They were doctors, because they were the most prepared and able to understand Arab writings. They were also money lenders, because Catholic religion forbade this practice, merchants, and strazzarioli, or rag sellers. The ghetto existed for more than 2.5 centuries, until Napoleon conquered Venice and in 1797 finally opened and eliminated every gate. Jews were then finally free to live in other areas of the city. The Campo di Ghetto Nuovo is a unique place in the world, where you can visit 3 synagogues in the same square. A tour which gives a comprehensive visit to several synagogues. Tours is given every hour starting at 10:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., except for the Sabbath, Saturday. It is about a 5-minute walk from the Vaporetto station San Marcuolo, which can be accessed by either the number 1, or number 82 boats. Outside Venice are the neighboring islands of Murano, Torcello and Lido. This is the Venetian Lagoon and the neighboring islands of Murano, Torcello and Lido. The island of Murano is world famous for its glass-making factory. These are some examples of Murano glass. Torcello is an island in the Venetian Lagoon where the main attraction is the Cathedral of Santa Maria featuring Byzantine mosaics. The Lido is the beach resort island. On the Lido, sidewalk cafes, a lengthy beach promenade and a quiet laid-back ambience await the visitor. The climate of Venice. Will it be hot in Venice, or will it be cold? Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Venice. Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Venice. Rainfall in Venice. Here is the rainfall throughout the year in Venice. The yearly total is 32 inches or 820 millimeters. Here is the average number of days per month with precipitation throughout the year in Venice. We see that it rains about 4 days every month throughout the year. Table of contents.